And we back. Gonna talk a little bit about the NFL. The NFL season obviously over. We're in the off season, about to hit the draft, but I want to talk more about free agency. I want to talk about and I'm not kidding, top 100 available players this off season, and I want to go from 100 all the way to 1. So this is gonna take a while. Buckle in. Obviously, everybody's board is going to be different than mine. I would be shocked if we had the same boards. I'll be honest with you. But yeah, going to start off on the offensive line here with Dan Moore. He was decidedly average as a starter for the tackle, or excuse me, as a starter at tackle for the Pittsburgh Steelers, which is why Pittsburgh used consecutive first-round picks on offensive linemen. He spread 12 sacks last year, according to Pro Football Focus. But of course, the left tackles are not easy to find. He's only 26, and he does have 66 starting games on his resume, so interesting. 99, want to go with Jacoby Brissett. Jacoby Brissett, obviously, of the New England Patriots last year, who saddled with an underwhelming supporting cast, struggled as an early season starter, 1-4, with a 72.4 QBR before the Patriots switched to Drake May. His 2024 numbers weren't good, but at the end of the day, he shouldn't be judged too harshly on being a starter in a talent-starved offense. He's performed well as a spot starter and as a bridge quarterback in the past. 88.9 QBR in 2022, which is not that far away, and has 53 starts on his resume, should draw plenty of interest as a bridge option. Next up, like Jacoby Brissett, Joe Flacco should be viewed as a solid bridge starter or mentor in 2025. He had 6 starts in 2024 for the Colts, 5 regular seasons, and 1 postseason start for the Cleveland Browns the previous year. A little reckless with the football, but, that's what Big Dick Joe does. He still has the arm and the leadership skill to spark an offense for a stretch of games if you need him. He isn't going to be the long-term he isn't going to be a long-term answer, but he's going to have an opportunity if he wants it. Next up, Eric Kendricks. Obviously, the Dallas defense was largely a disaster in 2024, but Eric Kendricks was a bright spot, right? The 33-year-old, he joined Dallas on a 1-year deal to reunite with Mike Zimmer, who was the defensive coordinator in Dallas. Finished the season with 138 tackles, 3 sacks, 2 picks. He is older, and he's probably, at this point, just average in coverage. He's still a starting caliber linebacker. In 96, I want to talk about Dante Jackson, right? He had some terrific moments in 2024. 5 picks and logging an opposing passer rating of 69.9 in coverage overall. Consistency was a significant issue, though, especially late in the season. He does have a history of missing games, and he's already 29. He did suffer 1 major injury, torn Achilles. He just maybe view it as a lower-tier free agent and a deeper cornerback market below. Next up, I want to talk about a tight end in Zach Ertz. If he was just a couple years younger, he'd probably be the top free agent at the tight end position. He did have a terrific season at 34, 66 receptions, 654 yards, and 7 touchdowns. But again, he can't really be viewed as a long-term starter. Does have some significant injury concern. He did play 17 games this past season, but he hasn't played more than 11 games in a season before this season since 2021. So back to the quarterback market, Mac Jones, right? Is he an above-average NFL starter? After 4 seasons, it doesn't really appear that way, but he was a Pro Bowler as a rookie. He has 49 regular season starts on his resume, including 7 last year for the Jaguars, right? He probably has more value as a bridge starter for teams eyeing quarterbacks in this draft or a high-end backup. He's only a year older than Tyler Shuck, I don't know how to pronounce his last name. He Louisville's quarterback this last year. He does still have time to reestablish himself as a team's QB1. Hell, we just saw Sam Darnold do it, right? We've seen Geno Smith do it. So the book's not out on Mac Jones yet. Isaiah Simmons, obviously Isaiah Simmons was the 8th pick in the 2020 draft. He has not come close to living up to that draft status. They've tried him at nickel, safety, linebacker. They haven't been able to uncover a consistent or high-level start in the process. He does have elite size and athleticism at 6'4", 238, but he hasn't been able to translate all that stuff into being a star. He has appeared in 84 games with the Arizona Cardinals and the New York Giants. The experience and the traits he has, there might be something in there. He could be a versatile and valuable role player. Next up, 92, Elijah Moore. 2021 second-round pick, Elijah Moore. He has pretty much failed to establish himself as a go-to receiver through 4 seasons with the Jets and the Browns. He has been productive, if inconsistent, as a complimentary target. He's topped 500 yards in 3 of his 4 campaigns and had a career best 640 yards in 2023. He's only 25. He'll be 25 this month. He's young, fast, athletic. His upside should land him an opportunity as a 3rd or 4th receiver this offseason. And finally, Harrison Smith. Will Harrison Smith even return for his age 36 season? We don't know, but it is hard to imagine him suiting up for a franchise other than the Vikings. He does remain a starting caliber safety. He played in 16 games last season, 87 tackles, 10 passes defended, and 3 picks. So next up, at 90, I want to talk about Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston, who's 31, he has officially reached journeyman/backup stage. He has the physical tools to be a potent pocket passer, and he's proven to himself to be a positive locker room leader. He just can't shake the ability to throw picks because he just loves zipping balls into tight windows. But again, he should be a sought-after bridge/backup quarterback. He can add life to a passing attack. But if you're viewing him as a potential starter, you have to understand that turnovers and touchdowns are going to come in bunches. Next up at safety at 89, Ifeatu Meffolonu out of Detroit. He never really established himself as a full-time starter with the Lions, but he has been a valuable role player when he's been healthy. 2023 2 years ago, he appeared in all 17 games, had 33 tackles, 3 sacks, 2 picks, only allowed a 61.2 passer rating in coverage. But injuries have been an issue for the 25-year-old. Missed time in 3 of his 4 campaigns and was limited to just 3 games last year with ankle and finger issues. He's capable of playing safety, corner, or nickel. He is an intriguing free agent, high-risk, high-reward type of free agent. Juwan Johnson, I have him at 88. He might be viewed by some teams as the top pass catcher in this 2025 free agent class for tight ends. He's not the most versatile pass catcher, but he does have good length at 6'4", 230. He's a big target in the red zone on third down. He's only 28 years old, caught 50 passes last year. 30 of them were first downs or touchdowns. Next up, Tyler Lockett at 87. He was released by the Seattle Seahawks after 10 seasons with Seattle as a cap-saving move. Only had 600 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns his last season. His relative lack of production can't entirely be blamed on his regression. I mean, obviously, Jackson Smith and Jigba's rise impacted his production as well as DK Metcalf's. Lockett's not the same player, but he's still a seasoned pass catcher, and he has enough burst to generate big plays. Here at 86, I want to talk about Rico Dowdle, right? This year's free agent running back pool is not as impressive as last year. But this year's draft is deep at running back, right? So backs like running back are not probably going to get a lot of offers, but he should be an intriguing, target for teams that don't have an established starter. He didn't have a heavy workload until he became the starter this past season. And he was more than serviceable in the running back 1 role, 1,300 scrimmage yards, 5 touchdowns. He was really one of the only people on Dallas' offense that was consistent. At 85, Poona Ford. At T-tackle, not the biggest guy, 5'11", 310, but he's a powerful defender capable of attacking the backfield or anchoring point of attack. He did have a great campaign with the Chargers this past season, 39 tackles, 3 sacks, 8 TFLs. He's set to turn 30 this year. He should be viewed as an average to above average defender. Next up, 84, Demarcus Robinson from the Los Angeles Rams. Deebo Samuel is obviously off the trade market. T. Higgins got franchise tagged. Receivers like Demarcus Robinson might see a boost in value, right? He's never been a number 1 or even a full-time number 2, but he's thrived in that tertiary role, right? This third receiver this past year, he caught 31 passes for 505 yards and 7 touchdowns. If he doesn't come back to the Rams, he should be valued by teams looking to add depth to their receiving core. So Darius Slay, still technically a member of the Eagles, but the Eagles did decide to release him with a post-June 1st designation, though he could return to the team, according to the St. Brown podcast. So Darius Slay told them, the St. Browns, that his top 2 preferred options are Philadelphia or Detroit, both places he's played before. He's likely going to be picky, but at 34, he probably isn't going to have that many suitors anyways, but he is still a capable starter. Did only allow a pass rating of 81.9 this past season for the Philadelphia Eagles. Sticking with the corners, I want to talk about Eric Stokes from Green Bay. He never really lived up to his status as a 2021 first-round pick, but he did show promise as a rookie, defending 14 passes, allowing just a pass rating of 71.3. But he has struggled to stay on the field and establish himself as a reliable starter since then. But still, some teams are going to take a chance on a 26-year-old first-round pick. He's young, he has physical upside, and he plays a premium position. Switching back to offense, Patrick Picari of the Baltimore Ravens. He did primarily play left guard for the Ravens this past season. He was average in that role. Pro Football Focus ranked him 74th out of 135 guards, but he's still a starting caliber lineman. He has experience playing tackle, and he's just entering, theoretically, his playing prime. His age and his versatility, being able to play both guard and tackle, should generate considerable interest in the open market. Next up, a name you might not have heard, Deo Odingbo. He's probably going to have a robust market in free agency. 25-year-old DN has shown steady growth during his 4 seasons and has flashed plenty of promise as a complimentary pass rusher. The past 3 seasons, 16 sacks, 21 TFLs, and 45 quarterback hits. 79, I want to talk about another Pittsburgh offensive lineman, James Daniels. He's a starting caliber guard when healthy, but he can struggle to open holes in the run game. But to be fair, that has been a struggle and an issue for the Pittsburgh Steelers in general. I keep wanting to call them the Philadelphia Steelers. I don't know why. He is coming off a torn Achilles, which could, dampen his market a little bit. But he has 84 starts on his resume, and he should find an opportunity as long as the medical's clear. Going back to the DN, I want to talk about Chauncey Goldstein out of Dallas. After 3 years of rotational piece, Goldstein emerged as a starter for Dallas this past season. Played in every game, 13 starts, 56 tackles, 5.5 sacks, 8 QB hits. He's probably going to be viewed more as a complimentary rusher, but he's a solid run defender who does not need to be limited to a 2-down role. Sticking with edge rushers, I want to talk about Derek Barnett from Houston. Philadelphia obviously moved on from him during the 2023 season, but he was quickly scooped up by the Houston Texans. He was remain productive. He's never really established himself, obviously, as a top-tier player, but he's a fine complementary pass rusher. Played 16 games this past season, 5 sacks, 2 fumble recoveries, and 7 quarterback hits. Back to the offensive line, going to go to the Minnesota Vikings, Dalton Risner. He's going to turn 30 in July. He's played each of the last 2 seasons on one-year deals. To me, that's reflective of his mid-level starter status, who long past the ceiling, right? Not overly impressive as a run blocker, but he's been solid in pass pro. Pro Football Focus rated him 13th among guards this past season in pass blocking. I want to talk about free agent cornerback Kendall Fuller now at 75. The Dolphins released him amongst other players in a cap purge. Obviously, he joined the Dolphins last season after 8 seasons with both Kansas City and the Washington Commanders. He started 11 games last season, and while his best days are probably behind him, he's still a starting caliber corner at a really tough position. In a deep free agent cornerback class, he should be available on a team-friendly deal, I would imagine. Sticking with corners, I want to talk about Nate Hobbs out of Vegas. Probably only a slot corner, but he's terrific when he's healthy, right? This past season, he allowed an opposing pass rating of 87.2 in coverage and has allowed an opposing pass rating below 100 in 3 of his first 4 campaigns. Again, the injuries are really the reason that Hobbs is this high on the list, I guess. After appearing in 16 games, all 16 games as a rookie in 2021, he hasn't appeared more than 13 games since then. 73, I want to talk about Tyron Smith, right? Obviously, this year's offensive tackle class is not that deep, right? He probably wouldn't be top 100 if this was a deeper class, but wasn't particularly efficient this past season. He's 34. He's sidelined by a neck injury to end this past season, but there aren't many starting caliber left tackles in the market, and he has a Hall of Fame resume, right? As a one-year bridge starter, should he decide to play, he'll have value. Want to go to the running back room. Want to talk about Nick Chubb, right? There was a time not so long ago when Nick Chubb was the best pure runner in the league, and if not the one of the. He could be that again, but he has plenty to prove after devastating knee injury impacted both last year and the year before. Was never 100% last season. Suffered a season-ending foot injury, probably compensating for something with his knee. But he could be closer to Pro Bowl form with another offseason between him and that brutal knee injury from 2 years ago. At 71, I want to talk about Emmanuel Ogbah out of Miami. Again, another guy that was purged, or will be purged, excuse me. He turned 31 in November. He keeps finding ways to impact games as a complimentary pass rusher, right? 5 sacks for the second straight season. This past season did add 11 QB hits. His most since notching 24 in 2021. Should be viewed as the mid-level starter or high-end rotational player, but he could add some juice to a pass rush. At 70, I want to talk about Robert Spillane, right? After starting his career as a rotation guy for Tennessee and Pittsburgh, he established himself quietly as a nice starter for the Raiders. Last 2 seasons, started all 34 games, played over 2,100 defensive snaps. This past season alone, 158 tackles, 2 sacks, and 10 TFLs. Headed back to Tennessee on the offensive side at number 69, nice. Wide receiver Nick Westbrook-Akine. Not going to generate a ton of attention heading into free agency. Obviously, Tennessee's offense was forgettable last year, and he really never produced any eye-popping numbers. But the 27-year-old has a chance to be a very impactful complementary receiver. He only had 500 yards, a little under, last season, but he flashed a terrific blend of downfield ability with 16 yards per catch and 9 touchdowns in the red zone. So, staying with the pass catchers, I want to talk about Mike Gesicki from the Cincinnati Bengals, the tight end. He could be more of a, you can consider him a big body wide receiver. He's not really a high-level in-line blocker, but he's extremely capable and extremely versatile when it comes to pass catching. Whether playing on the line or in the slot, he can create mismatches left, right, and center. In his first season with the Bengals, 65 passes, 665 yards, 2 touchdowns. Staying with pass catchers, want to talk about D-Hop, right? Still has juice left in the tank, and we saw that this year. 32-year-old, obviously he's past his prime and is not a number 1 receiver, but he's 6'1", he's physical, he can still win one-on-one matchups in just 10 games this past season following an in-season trade. 41 passes, 437 yards, 4 touchdowns. Staying in Kansas City, I want to talk about Tershawn Wharton, right? Entered the league as a UDFA in 2020. He's going to get a sizable contract this offseason, right? Had his most productive year this past year, 29 tackles, 6.5 sacks, 11 QB hits. He's smaller for a interior defender, 6'1", 280. He offers intriguing potential as a dedicated pass rusher. Want to stay on the defensive side, but go down to Dallas and talk about Jordan Lewis. Jordan Lewis is a nickel-only corner. He's probably going to find a limited market, especially because he'll turn 30, and he hasn't really produced game-changing plays, only 10 picks in 8 seasons, so about a little over 1 a year. He has shown that he can be a valuable role player, though, right? Only allowed an opposing passer rating of 85.3 this past season, and has never allowed more than an opposing passer rating of over 100. At 64, I have Brandon from the Jacksonville Jaguars. He turned 33 this past year. He hasn't been a Pro Bowler, unfortunately, since 2021. He was one of the NFL's premier interior offensive lineman, but he's managed to disappear with Jacksonville. But he hasn't missed a start in those 3 years, right? He's a solid pass protector. Pro Football Focus ranked him 19th among guards in pass blocking this past season. Staying on defense, I want to talk about Trayvon Moehrig out of the Raiders, the safety. He's quietly developed in one of the league's more underrated safeties the last couple of years. In 2 years, 18 passes defended, 5 picks, 3 sacks. He is more of a boom or bust player, especially in coverage, and he's not a Pro Bowl caliber player yet, but his best ceiling could be ahead of him, and he's only going to turn 26 this summer. Staying at safety, I want to talk about Jeremy Chin of the Washington Commanders. Coming off his 5th pro season, only turned 27 a month ago. But like Moerig, he can whiff in coverage, but he is a physical, productive, and versatile player, right? He kind of plays more of a hybrid safety corner linebacker role. He can fill multiple roles for a defense. This past season, 117 tackles, 2 sacks, 7 TFLs, and an interception. Staying on defense, Jamian Sherwood, linebacker for the New York Jets, just turned 25 a couple months ago, became a full-time starter for the first time this past season. Fairly productive at that, right? Played in every game, 16 starts, 158 tackles, a league-high 98 solo tackles, and 2 sacks. Obviously, pass coverage not his strongest trait. And one-year starters tend to carry question marks, especially those on bad teams, but he does carry a lot of upside, which teams will find intriguing. Staying on defense, want to talk about Justin Reed, the safety for the Kansas City Chiefs. He's going to carry a high profile into the free agency because he's been a part of Kansas City's AFC dominance since signing with the Chiefs in 2022. But Reed has been more good than great. Has been very inconsistent against the run, more so than the team would probably prefer. He's been dependable in coverage. The league's 12th best safety in coverage by Pro Football Focus. So at 59, we're going back to Indianapolis to talk about Ryan Kelly, right? There's a limited market for centers this past season. Ryan Kelly's going to benefit from that significantly. Was only 17th among centers this past season, according to Pro Football Focus. Did battle neck, calf, knee injuries, but he's still a starting caliber center when healthy. Has 121 starts on his resume and 4 Pro Bowls. At 58, I want to talk about Javon Kinlaw from the New York Jets. He never really played up to his draft status in San Francisco, but he did revitalize his career this past year in New York. He started all 17 games this past season, finished with 40 tackles, 4.5 sacks, and 5 TFLs. He might not be the elite difference maker that he was projected/drafted to be, but he's beginning to settle in as a solid starter, and teams are going to be willing to bet on his upside this offseason. Speaking of D tackles, I want to talk about DJ Jones from Denver. He just turned 30 a couple months ago, but he's a productive and largely dependable interior defender. Started all 17 games this past season after starting 31 the 2 previous seasons, which means he's missed, 3, maybe 2 games, depending on, I don't remember exactly when they started doing 17 games. This past season, 42 tackles, a sack, 3 QB hits. More of a traditional run stuffer than a penetrator at this point in his career. He can fill a valuable role on a D-line. D-tackle has started to become a premium position. Shout out to Aaron Donald for that. And Jones is still better than average. Staying on defense, I want to talk about Mike Hilton from Cincinnati. Mike Hilton did appear to lose a step in coverage this past season. He will turn 31 before free agency, but he's still a quality DB with outside-inside versatility, right? This past season, 2 years ago, 73 tackles, 5 passes defended, 12 tackles for loss. He remains one of the NFL's better blitzing corners as well. Next up, probably the best center on the market, Drew Dahlman from Atlanta, right? He's coming in at number 55. He's been a full-time starter for the Atlanta Falcons since his 2nd season. He's a terrific run blocker who can excel as a pulling center, right? He is technically below average, according to Pro Football Focus, for the last 2 seasons, and has battled ankle injuries. Did miss 3 games in 2023 and 8 last year. He'll be valued by teams looking to overlook those injuries, right? At number 54, want to talk about Ernest Jones, linebacker from Seattle. He has the long-term potential to be a star for a defense if he can find a permanent home after being traded twice in the last year. Pro Football Focus ranked him 46th amongst all linebackers in terms of run defense, and he might not be off the board early, right? He underwent off-season knee surgery, and he's going to be subject to medical checks before receiving any official offers. At 53, I want to talk about wide receiver Stephon Diggs from the Houston Texans, right? His history as a Pro Bowl caliber number 1 receiver will earn him interest in free agency. He definitely would have received more interest had he made it to the market a couple of years ago. His production dipped toward the end of the 23 season with Buffalo. He was more of a role player with the Texans last year. A great one, but obviously suffered a torn ACL. 31-year-old Diggs still has a high ceiling, but to me is one of the bigger boom or bust free agents in this market. Staying at receiver, want to talk about Mac Hollins, right? He doesn't have the number 1 receiver upside of Diggs, but he has been a tremendous complimentary target in Buffalo this past season, and he doesn't really have any injury concerns, right? He only caught 31 passes for 378 yards and 5 touchdowns. He had a quarterback rating of 118.6 when targeted. So staying on offense with Najee Harris, right? Najee Harris is one of the most mercurial free agents probably in this market, right? On one hand, he's 27 years old, or will be tomorrow as I'm recording this. I think you'll see this the 10th, which means you'll see it. His birthday would have been yesterday. He's a durable, high-volume back who adds value as a pass catcher out of the backfield, right? But on the other hand, he doesn't have breakaway speed. He averages less than 4 yards per carry, and that's low in terms of what most teams want, right? He might find a couple strong suitors, but in a year with a deep running back draft class, may not be in high demand. Staying on offense, I want to talk about Darius Slayton, right? He's a guy that should theoretically benefit from a shrinking wide receiver pool this offseason. He's not a true number one, but he's filled that role in the past and has remained productive in a complementary role, right? 39 pass catches for 573 yards and 2 touchdowns, and he was the number 3 option this past season behind Blake Neighbors and Wan'Dale Robinson. Only 28, just turned 28, and he should draw attention from most receiver-needy teams. At number 49, I want to talk about Paulson Adebo, the cornerback from New Orleans, right? He does carry a few question marks coming into free agency. He does have a penchant for drawing flags. He's coming into this offseason on a season-ending broken femur, but he's young, performed at a high level when he's able to limit mistakes. He has 51 starts so far in his career and has only allowed a passer rating of 71.9 in this past season. At 48, I want to talk about J.K. Dobbins of the LA Chargers. He would rank much higher if he didn't have the injury history that he's had, right? 26-year-old had 1,100 yards this past season, 9 touchdowns in 13 games, averaged almost 5 yards per carry. But he's missed time with a knee injury, which isn't ideal after 4 years, including a torn ACL, torn Achilles. So you'll see the injury history might cause him to miss some time or drop lower on the board. Staying on offense, I want to talk about Will Fries from the Indianapolis Colts. He was terrific when he was healthy, right? Pro Football Focus graded him as the 4th best guard this past season. The problem is he only played 5 games after a fractured tibia that required immediate surgery, right? Developed into a large, reliable starter for the Colts before his 2024 injury. And his market value could, vary depending on how bad the injury was and how they view his injury and his upside. At 46, I want to talk about Stephon Gilmore, right? He will turn 35 right after the season starts. He should be valued as a starter. In 15 games for the Vikings, only allowed an opposing passer rating of 94.1. He has started to finally show signs of decline, but the 5-time Pro Bowler should have another productive campaign in his tank. At 45, I want to talk about Keenan Allen, right? The 32-year-old receiver didn't really have the most impressive season, was limited by soft tissue injuries, missed a pair of games, but still 70 passes, 744 yards, 7 touchdowns, 777s across the board. In an underperforming attack in Chicago that really wasn't that explosive, the crafty veteran can still aid in offense, and he's going to be particularly attractive to teams with a young quarterback because of his veteran experience. At 44, I want to talk about Lavonte David, right? He did turn 35 a couple months ago. He is still a starting caliber linebacker. Started every game last year, 122 tackles, 5.5 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, and an interception. They did have positive conversations with the Bucs, him and his agent, at the Combine, and there is a chance he comes back to Tampa, so it'll be interesting to see what happens. Speaking of edge rushers and speaking of linebackers, I want to talk about Malcolm Koonce from the Vegas Raiders. He would have ranked higher if he didn't miss the entire season with a knee injury, right? 26-year-old recorded 8 sacks and 23 quarterback pressures in 2023, only played 44% of the snaps. That suggests he could be even more productive in an increased role, but the problem is he only has 1 year of high-level production and a significant injury between then and now. So it'll be interesting to see what teams do. Staying on defense, Sebastian Joseph Day of the Tennessee Titans. He might not be elite, but he's coming off a very impressive season and entering a market starving for standout interior defensive linemen. He appeared in every game last year for Tennessee, consistently made an impact against both the run and the pass. Pro Football Focus ranked him 28th overall amongst defensive tackles last season. Speaking of defenders, Tyrell Dodson from Miami. He was one of Seattle's most impactful defenders until they waived him in November. He quickly landed in Miami and continued his productive play. He had 36 tackles and 3 interceptions in 8 games in Miami. The AFC Defensive Player of the Week in 17 is a do-it-all linebacker. He won't turn 27 until midsummer. Again, staying on defense, right? Chase Young of the New Orleans Saints. He did struggle this past season. He didn't. The Saints did. But he was great, right? 5.5 sacks, only 25 years old, 34 quarterback pressures, was the second pick in the 2020 draft, spent time with the Commanders and the Niners. He had one of his better seasons this past year with the Saints. He has produced back-to-back 5 sack seasons for the first time in his career, and he's only going to be 26 next month. Speaking of linebackers, E.J. Speed of Indianapolis, right? He made the most of his contract year, setting career highs in tackles with 142 and solo tackles with 93. He's a good run defender. He's serviceable in pass coverage, but he also had 17 missed tackles, which is a concern for most teams. We've had a lot of defenders, and we're going to continue to do that, right? Charles Omenihu out of Kansas City. He missed over half the season with a torn ACL suffered last year. He did return in late November and helped Kansas City reach its 3rd straight Super Bowl. Recorded a sack, 3 TFLs, and a forced fumble in the postseason alone. And then 2023, 7 sacks, 5 TFLs, 11 quarterback hits, and 2 forced fumbles. Again, staying with edge rushers, Dante Fowler out of Washington. There's not a terrible amount of quality pass rushers, but Dante Fowler, he could be a bargain, right? 30-year-old looking for his 4th team in 5 seasons, coming off a terrific campaign in Washington. He finished this past season with 10.5 sacks, 20 quarterback pressures. Teams looking to roll the dice on an older defender who's never really been a star, but they could find themselves a steal with Dante Fowler. Staying on defense, Christian Fulton, the corner out of Los Angeles. He had a down year in 2023 with the with the Titans, but he established himself as a great player this past season in LA. He's had allowed an opposing passer rating below 92 in all 4 of his seasons. He did miss time with a hamstring injury, but again, soft tissue, not necessarily a long-term thing. Staying on defense, Jaron Reed from the Seattle Seahawks. He will turn 33 before the season starts. He might be too old for some rebuilding teams, but he's going to draw interest from teams that are looking to contend. He's a disruptive, versatile lineman who can fit in a variety of schemes. He can play end, D tackle, nose tackle. He's consistently shown the ability to stop the run and pressure opposing quarterbacks. At 34, I want to talk about Aaron Jones. Again, I've said this every time I brought up a running back. The 2025 free agent market for running backs is lacking, right? The draft does appear deep, right? That could be an underwhelming market for veteran backs, especially compared to last season, right? But Aaron Jones is the closest thing to a proven difference maker that he's both when healthy and scheduled to be available. 1,600 scrimmage yards, 7 touchdowns this past season, and even he could see some low offers. Staying on offense, Kevin Zeitler, the guard from the Detroit Lions. He won't appeal to every team because of his age, right? But his experience and consistency will appeal, geez Louise, to playoff-ready franchises, right? He's going to turn 35 in a couple days, but he played extremely well for the Lions this past year. Only probably going to get a 1 or 2 year deal, but he's perfectly capable of helping anchor an offensive line in that time frame. At 32, I want to talk about Carlton Davis, the cornerback from the Detroit Lions. He only turned 28 in December. He's still playing at an extremely high level, right? Allowed a pass rating of just 77 during this past season. Hasn't allowed a pass rating over 100 since his rookie season in 2018. He did end the season on IR with a fractured jaw, but that's not an injury that raises long-term concerns. That's a freak injury. Staying on defense, Joey Bosa, recently a free agent. The Chargers released him in a cap-saving move. He does have 5 Pro Bowls, but he will turn 30 in the summer. He's missed time in each of the past 3 years, but he's still going to get considerable interest in the market. Only played 28 games in the last 3 seasons. That'll be a concern. And he's not the best player outside of run stopping, but he's still going to make the occasional play in the passing game. Had 5 sacks last year, but he's still a top-tier defender in the run game. Staying on the defensive line, Levi Onwuzurike, He battled a back injury earlier this year, but he was still a huge piece of Detroit's defense. He's only going to be 27 this month. He should have a bright career if he can stay healthy. Injury is really the only concern. He had a sack and a half and 22 pressures this past year. He missed the entire 22 season with the back surgery and only played 10 games the year after. Staying on defense, Anthony Nelson from Tampa Bay. He's never really been a full-time starter, but he's been a highly productive outside linebacker who can set the edge, defend the pass, and get after the opposing quarterback. He'll turn 28 this month. He's not really a true edge rusher, but he was effective in that role this past season with 4 sacks and 20 QB pressures. He's played both outside and edge in Tampa. He should draw interest from teams regardless of their alignments. Staying on defense, Cam Bynum out of Minnesota. He had 137 tackles and 94 solo tackles last year, but he had a dip in raw production this past season, right? Obviously, Minnesota's defense improved on the front side, which means he's going to have less opportunities to make open field tackles. But he made a significant jump in coverage, right? He'll turn 27 this summer, allowed a pass rating below 80 this entire season, his first time since his rookie year. His skill set, production, and relative youth is going to generate a lot of interest on the open market. Staying on the defensive side, I know I keep saying that, right? But Hassan Reddick, right? He's going to be viewed as a wild card. It was a flop this past season. He wasn't impactful even after his contract holdout, but his ceiling is high as hell, right? With the Eagles, 11 sacks in 2023, 13 TFLs, and 35 quarterback pressures. 4 straight seasons of double-digit quarterback sacks before he was traded to the Jets. At 26, I want to talk about Amari Cooper, right? A receiver for the Buffalo Bills. He had a pretty forgettable year. Only 547 yards, 4 touchdowns on 44 receptions. He had a terrible Browns offense and a pretty steep learning curve after getting traded midseason to Buffalo. He's going to turn 31 this summer, but he's still a top-notch route runner. Had 1,300 yards 2 years ago. Staying at receiver, I want to talk about Devontae Adams, right? He's a late addition to the pool. The Jets released him. Only had 854 yards and 7 touchdowns this past season with the Jets, but he should draw quite a bit of interest in the open market. Age could keep him away from certain teams, but contending teams looking for a receiver, he can help them. I'm thinking maybe a return to Green Bay, maybe a return to Vegas, which is so funny that I'm saying that, but those are good fits for him. At 24, I have DeMarcus Lawrence, right? Age and health are the biggest concerns with DeMarcus Lawrence, right? He's a 4-time Pro Bowler, but he turns 33 next month. Only had 4 games this past season where he played because of a Lisfranc injury. However, when healthy and playing at his best, Lawrence is a productive pass rusher. Excuse me, I keep burping. An even better run defender. In 2023, 4 sacks, 50 tackles, 10 TFLs, and 6 passes defended. Places to me that would use him: Atlanta, Washington. Those would be some big places for him. Staying on defense, Byron Murphy of the Minnesota Vikings. His stock since joining the Vikings in 2023 has gone up considerably, right? His last season as a member of the Arizona Cardinals, 103.1 coverage rating, but he's been a dependable starter the last 2 years in Minnesota, right? Only allowed a 76.7 passer rating this year. First-time Pro Bowler. Been a bit inconsistent over the years, but he's an above-average starter who should be off the board early and handsomely. compensated. I'm thinking Baltimore, maybe New England. They have a lot of cap space, but Baltimore could use some more help in that secondary. At 22, I want to talk about Russell Wilson. I am just starting over my words, trying to spit them all out at once. Starting caliber quarterbacks, even middle of the road ones, they tend to fetch a premium in free agency. That's not going to change this year, especially now that Matt Stafford's off the trade market, right? Kirk Cousins landed a 4-year, $180 million deal coming off a torn Achilles. Russell Wilson will not get that type of money, but he should be viewed as the top bridge option or one of the top bridge options. I'm thinking maybe Cleveland. I know they just traded for Geno Smith, but maybe Vegas, especially because Russell Wilson is not going to be, how would I phrase this? He's not going to command much. He's not going to get much money. Staying on the offense, I want to talk about Tevin Jenkins from the Chicago Bears. It feels like the Bears are going to move on from Tevin Jenkins. Obviously, they just acquired Jonah Jackson and have a deal to acquire Joe Thuney. He should find a good free agent market because of his age. He's only 26. He's got positional versatility, and he's played well at guard when healthy, right? Pro Football Focus ranked him 15th amongst guards. It would be interesting to see him go to Minnesota. Again, maybe even New England. At number 20, I want to talk about Justin Simmons, right? The safety from the Atlanta Falcons. He was a 2-time Pro Bowler with the Broncos. He joined the Falcons late last offseason, and he's still one of the league's better back-end defenders, right? Only allowed an 81.9 opposing passer rating, was a bright spot in a Falcons defense that was otherwise underwhelming. He's proven himself in multiple defensive schemes. He should see a stronger market this year than he did last year. I'm thinking maybe a return to Denver. Philly would be awesome. They just got rid of Darius Slay. Speaking of DBs, want to talk about Chargers cornerback Asante Samuel. First of all, met Asante Samuel fall of 2023. Dude's one of the nicest people I ever met, right? Absolute stud, right? He does carry some concerns. Missed tackle's been an issue. He only had 12. He had 12 in 2023, and he had a season-ending shoulder injury that limited him to just 4 games last year. But been a reliable covered corner when healthy. 87.4 coverage last season in all 4 pro seasons. Never had an opposing passer rating over 100. Again, I'm thinking Green Bay. They have a lot of cap space. They could go get someone, throw him across from Jair Alexander. San Francisco, obviously, they're figuring out with their cap space. They just traded Debo, so it'll be interesting. Again, staying on defense, B.J. Hill out of Cincinnati, right? He's going to turn 30 in April in a month from now. He missed time with a hamstring injury. He might have to settle for a short, prove-it deal, but he did return from injury to finish the season out with Cincinnati. One of the best impactful interior defenders when healthy. Started every game 2 years ago and finished with 51 tackles, 4.5 sacks, and 23 quarterback pressures. The Bears, we could use some fucking interior defense. And if not us, the Colts. Neither of these teams could stop the run last year. At 17, I want to talk about Mekhi Becton. His redemption arc this past season was one of the feel-good stories, right? The 11th overall pick of the 2020 draft battled injuries and poor play as a left tackle. But he found new life with the Philadelphia Eagles at right guard, right? He has been awesome. And I think Dallas, looking to rebuild that offensive line, obviously, they've lost a lot of pieces the last couple of years. The Patriots, again, just trying to get more guys to protect Drake May. Staying on offense, Cam Robinson out of Minnesota, right? They acquired Cam Robinson out of Jacksonville after Christian Darrisaw suffered a season-ending injury. Robinson wasn't as dependable as Darrisaw, right? But he did help the Vikings finish a 14-3 season. Going to look to latch onto a team with a more permanent role. Cleveland, obviously, they've been looking for a left tackle for God knows how long. Kansas City just launched Joe Thuney, can move some guys around. It'll be interesting to see where Cam Robinson signs. At number 15, I want to talk about Rasul Douglas out of Buffalo. There's no getting around the fact that he had a down year this past season with Buffalo. Started 15 games, but allowed a pass rating of 122 in coverage, right? But his history as a high-level starter, got terrific instincts, ball skills that can't be overlooked. Between 21 and 23, the 29-year-old had 14 picks, 3 pick sixes for both the Bills and the Packers. Also, 45 passes defended over the past 4 seasons. A team that could use someone like that? Cincinnati, Detroit. Both teams that were littered with injuries. Detroit on defense, and then Cincinnati, who just didn't have a defense last year. Speaking of teams out of defense, I want to talk about Khalil Mack from the Los Angeles Chargers. He's another defender that had a bit of a down year this past season by his standards. Still had 6 sacks, 22 quarterback pressures. Did get his 9th Pro Bowl. But he had 4 sacks after 8 games. And then in 2023, 17 sacks, 21 tackles for loss, and 36 quarterback pressures in 2023. 2 teams that I think could use him. The Bears. I would love Khalil Mack back on the Bears. Get him on a 2-year deal. I think that'd be sick. Maybe Atlanta. Atlanta, again, they need edge rushers. They need quarterback pressures. Speaking of players that could get the quarterback, Azeez Ojulari out of New York. He hasn't been a full-time starter since his rookie season. He's not as accomplished as some of the edge rushers that are set to be available, but he's a rotational pass rusher who's good at that. and he's flashed top-tier potential. He won't turn 25 till mid. He finished his 2021 rookie campaign with 8 sacks, 27 QB pressure, 13 quarterback hits. He did have more opportunities this past season when Kayvon Thibodeau was out. He tallied 6 sacks, 7 TFLs, 10 quarterback hits in just 11 games. He did miss the final 6 games with a toe injury, but he's a stud, right? I think Vegas could use some more edge rushers outside Max Crosby. The Patriots, I'm going to link the Patriots to a lot of teams or a lot of players just because they have a lot of cap space. Staying on defense, Talanoa Hufanga of the San Francisco 49ers. He does carry enough of question marks to be considered a risk-reward free agent, right? But his upside is high as hell. He should be one of the best defensive signings this offseason, and his injury history is the biggest concern, right? Suffered a torn ACL 2 years ago, landed back on IR this season with torn ligaments in his wrist. Never really was fully healthy this past season, but he did play in San Francisco's final 5 games. Again, I think he would be great in Baltimore. I think Vegas needs help in that secondary. It would be interesting to see him go to those places. Sticking with the Niners, want to talk about Dre Greenlaw. He carries some injury concerns, right? Suffered a torn Achilles in the Super Bowl 2 years ago. Missed the majority of this past season and probably tried to return too soon. He appeared in just 2 games and then went back with a calf injury on IR. Usually that means you're compensating, right, and that you injure something else. He would be interesting to go in Dallas, right? Or Washington. I think Washington, obviously, you have Bobby Wagner, but he's old. No offense, Bobby Wagner, you are old. But Dallas would be a nice piece next to him, too. Want to go back to the offense at number 10. We're at the top 10 free agents this past, for this offseason. Justin Fields. Now, let me get there, right? The Steelers are probably not going to retain both Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, and there's a non-zero chance they keep either of them. Wilson has value as a veteran bridge quarterback. Fields has the youth. He just turned 26 a couple days ago, and he has a lot of upside, and teams might be willing to look at him as a possible franchise signal caller. The Jets, they need a young piece if they're not going to go draft a guy. The Titans, if they're not going to draft a guy, I've been hearing rumors that both the Jets looking obviously with no Aaron Rodgers, and the Titans, obviously, if you're going to not draft, if you're going to trade down, maybe get Travis Hunter, and then try to go get Justin Fields. At number 9, I want to talk about Nick Bolton, the linebacker from the Kansas City Chiefs. Obviously, Zach Bowen headed back to Philly on a new 3-year deal. Dre Greenlaw and Nick Bolton are the top linebackers in this free agency class. Bolton's not the most elite athlete, right? Really can't follow fast guys in coverage, right? But he is terrific at what he does best, right? He's an aggressive and relentless run defender. He can rack up tackles in bunches, and he's really good at attacking the line of scrimmage. Cincinnati's a guy that might look to poach him. Tennessee looking to revamp their entire defense. He would be a place that he could be the guy in Tennessee. At number 8, I want to talk about Chris Godwin of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Bucs opted not to tag Godwin, and there's a chance he comes back to Tampa on a new contract. He has every reason to test the market, right? T. Higgins got the franchise tag. Godwin is probably the number 1 receiver in this free agency class. He did suffer a season-ending ankle injury this year, but he was having a great season before it happened. Obviously, Jacksonville, Liam Cohen was Tampa's offensive coordinator this past season. New England needs a wide receiver 1. I don't know who the hell they even have over there at this point. It'll be interesting to see what they do. At number 7, Milton Williams, the defensive tackle for the Philadelphia Eagles. I don't know if a single player improved their stock more this season than Milton Williams. The 25-year-old had 7 TFLs, 5 sacks, 10 quarterback hits, and 12 quarterback pressures during the regular season and made an even bigger impression in the Super Bowl. Just in the championship game alone, 4 tackles, 2 sacks, and a forced fumble. I mean, you want to talk about raising your stock in a single game? Detroit, right? They have almost $50 million in cap space. New Orleans, obviously they don't really have the cap space, but fuck, they never do it. They could use someone like Milton Williams. At 6, I want to talk about Ronnie Stanley. I keep calling him Ronnie Stanley. I meant Ronnie Stanley, the offensive tackle for the Baltimore Ravens. Alard Jackson. Holy hell, I am stuttering today. And the Rams agreed to a 3-year deal. Ronnie Stanley is the undisputed left tackle in 2025. He did battle a lot of injuries between 2020 and 2023, and he will turn 31 later this month, but he was fully healthy this past season, returned to the Pro Bowl, started every game, and only allowed 2 sacks according to Pro Football Focus. If I'm the Chiefs, I'm doing whatever I can to go get Ronnie Stanley for, a year or 2. And if I can't, the Patriots, throw this motherfucker a bag and protect Drake May. Speaking of defense, we weren't talking about defense, we're talking about offense. At number 5, Charvarius Ward. He had a down year in 2025. He allowed a passer rating of 116.6 in coverage, but just a 64.5 the year before. But his pass performance and overall body of work, 89 regular season starts and 16 postseason starts, he's going to get plenty of free agency interest, right? Jacksonville would be interesting to go get him, right? They were last in passing yards. And the Chargers, especially if they lose Christian Fulton and or Asante Samuel. Speaking of corners, DJ Reed, right, out of the Jets. This free agency class is going to be deep at corner. DJ Reed should be one of the most coveted free agents in the offseason. The best ball of DJ Reed's career was been played since joining the Jets this year. He's a 2018 5th-round pick of San Francisco. He spent time in San Francisco, Seattle, landed in New York, started every single game that he's appeared. Obviously overshadowed by Sauce Gardner, but he's a stud. Cincinnati would be a place for him, right? They needed a legit difference maker in the secondary, or the Niners. Robert Saleh's in San Francisco. He could use a return there. At 3, it was time. Sam Darnold. The Vikings didn't tag him, right? That's the biggest surprise to me, right? He's set to cash in. Is he a can't miss free agent? No. He struggled in the last 2 games this past season and showcased the same issues in poor pocket awareness and a tendency to hold on to the ball that plagued him early in his career. But you don't lead a team to 14 wins and be bad, right? The Raiders. I know the Raiders just traded for Geno Smith, right? But the Raiders, maybe you get him on a deal and just bring this open QB competition in. The Titans, if you're not going to take any of the quarterbacks and you want to get Travis Hunter and you trade down to 3, this is the guy you go after. At 2, Javon Holland of the Miami Dolphins. It is a good offseason to be DBs, right? Several talented corners and safeties available, but Javon Holland might be the best mix of age, consistency, and playmaking ability, right? He missed time with a broken hand this season, but he played 15 games, had 63 tackles, and only allowed an 89 passer rating. He did miss time in 2023 with a pair of knee sprains, but he's not injury prone, right? If I'm the Bears, release fucking Kevin Byard and go get Javon Holland, please. For the Patriots, right? They don't have foundational players. Javon Holland would be a staple in this defense. And finally, the final player I want to talk about, Josh Sweat. The Eagles had some difficult choices to make in free agency. They chose to re-sign Zach Bound, and that leads to this. That leads to Josh Sweat hitting the market, right? That means Milton Williams and Josh Sweat are probably both going to be free agents. These are premium guys at premium positions. Arizona would be a logical landing spot, right? Jonathan Gannon coached him in Philly, and they only had 41 sacks as a team. None of them got over 5. So he would be a piece for them. Or the Patriots. They lead the league in cap space, had the NFL's fewest sacks. They should have Sweat on their wish list. The Patriots need to go spend all that money on this defense right now. But yeah, holy shit, that was 100 different players I just named. That was the first time I've done anything like this. That was a lot. That was like an hour. If you watch this whole thing, thank you so much. Make sure to comment down below what you thought of this list, who you think is going to go where. Any other videos you want to see, comment that down below. And YouTube thinks you're going to like this video. So do that and tell me what you think.